Hello, and welcome to PeppTalks with Jeanne. I'm your host, Jeanne Pepper. I started doing PeppTalks as a way to inspire you to do intentional acts of kindness and to further the goals of #BlazeItForward. Over the past 6 years, PeppTalks evolved. I now use it for interviewing people actively making a difference in this world through their volunteerism, community service, or careers. My guests are all here because they have dedicated their lives to making this world a better place. Join us as we delve into the hopes, dreams, and aspirations of these truly inspiring and hardworking people. And my guest today is Dr. Janeane Bernstein.
Hi.
Welcome.
Thanks for having me.
Well, thank you for coming on this Friday morning. Why I wanted to have Janeane on the show is because she has become an advocate for mental health, and she's written 2 books about it. I'll hold those up so we can see. This is Get the Funk Out. And when did you write this?
Came out in 2019.
Okay, so that was right before the pandemic.
Right.
Okay, and then we have her latest, Better Humans: What the Mental Health Pandemic Teaches Us About Humanity. And this was just recently published.
Yes, towards the end of last year.
Yeah, so my husband had a copy of this book in the house, and I saw this, and I started looking through it, and I thought, why don't I have Janeane on my show? I mean, we're both in the same space here. She wants the same thing that I want, which is adequate mental health care for every American.
Yes.
So, I mean, that seems like something that we should have in place, just like we have
Right.
physical health available. So
Right.
How did you get into this? How did you start your career? And let's just let you have the floor.
So I call it a very non-linear path, which I think is the best life to have, really. Because along the way, through like losing a job, which I did, I was working in Boston and I was in training and development, and it was so dull. It was so boring. And I was 23. I'd gotten the job out of grad school at Syracuse, and it was the best thing that ever happened to me, losing my job, because I realized like it wasn't for me long term, and I did it for freelance work. When I say did it, I was designing bank training, facilitator guides, and all this material, but it was just too dull long term. I couldn't see myself sitting in a cubicle for the rest of my life. Anyway, so fast forward, I moved to California in 2000. I got married in Brookline, met my husband in a bookstore, and I thought I was going to work for like Disney or DreamWorks. I just was chasing these big names and big opportunities, and they just didn't seem like a good fit. And so I came out here and I started doing things I really wanted to do, like radio, and so I just kind of did this whole non-linear journey of saying yes to a lot of different things.
So yes helped you move along.
Yeah.
Any big surprises in the kinds of jobs that you took along the way?
Well, I studied voice acting in Boston because I had gone to a Syracuse University alumni lunch, which I did not sign up for. My dad was like, "Oh, by the way, you're going. You need to be there tomorrow at noon." And I was like, "Oh, Dad," you know. And I went and I met an actress. She was probably in her 70s. And she says, "You are clearly unhappy in your work." And I said, "I really am." She said, "Why don't you, explore other things? You're young." And she told me what she did. And I said, voice acting is something I've always wanted to do. She says, "Great." She took out a piece of paper, wrote the name of her acting teacher. And she said, "You're to call her today and then call me to tell me you called her." So I did. And I studied with this woman for 8 years, and it was life-changing because I don't know about you, but there are times when I've been very insecure in my life, and I needed to kind of work through stuff, and it was like therapy, taking a lot of voice acting. So when I landed here, I started getting booked on voiceover roles because I had trained, but it wasn't a way for me to make a career, and I was looking for other things. So I just started, radio at UCI and different things and writing, and yeah.
Was a lot of the work that you did on the volunteer side at first, or were you able to get, was it monetized right away for you?
Voiceover was monetized, mm-hmm. Yes, but it's really hard. I mean, there's a small percentage of people that really can make a career out of voiceover. And then I kind of figured out like, I can pay to get a demo made, and then, it's so expensive, and then you get an agent, and then you're kind of waiting for the phone to ring. So you kind of figure out how to make your own way in the voiceover world. But I even took a job as a puppeteer at one point through Backstage West, and it was really cool. It was really cool. So just having a lot of different experiences was great. Yeah.
So your backup plan was some sort of an educator role with your EDD?
Right, right.
Because your doctorate was in education.
Yes. So when I was in Boston and I was doing the freelance work still in training and development, I was really still very unhappy. I wanted to leave Boston, and my dad used to joke, "Oh, someday you get your doctorate," and I'd say that it's just so much work. I don't think so. And at my lowest of lows, he's like, "Why don't you just take a class?" So I went and I took 2 classes. One was qualitative research, and if you know anything about qualitative research, it's so fascinating because you're just observing, and he'd say, ride the elevator, sit in a coffee shop. Don't come back and say someone is drunk. Tell me specifically, because you can't just jump to conclusions if somebody's staggering into a coffee shop. So I took the 2 classes. I was the youngest in the program, and I'm like, you know what? I'm going to sign up. I need like mental boot camp.
So this was therapeutic for you?
Therapeutic. I was 25.
And how old were you when you finished?
28.
3 years?
3 years. I did summers. It's all I did. I didn't do anything else.
Wow. What school were you at?
Boston University. It was intense.
Wow.
It was really intense.
So after you finish with a degree like that, are there jobs waiting for you?
Not necessarily, because here I was young, and I kind of went into it more of, again, mental boot camp, and maybe I'll find a new direction. I did get more freelance jobs that were more interesting, but I still, in my mind, I wasn't finding things that were creative enough. And so it's so funny because now, full circle, I'm designing workshops using my background and my degree. When I'm on the radio, I'm using my qualitative background, listening for themes and what people say. Mm-hmm. You know, if I'm talking to you and you have scripted questions and you just want to follow those questions, but I talk about my grandmother, you want to go to the grandmother because that's interesting, right?
Yeah. I mean, there's definitely things that people want to hear about, and there's things that you want to get out. But, you know, we can try to connect the two together.
Exactly.
So that because there are parts of your career that probably are boring to everybody, but there are parts of it that are really tracking with what the zeitgeist is. And that's really the mental health crisis that we have today. So your first book that you wrote, Get the Funk Out, tell me what inspired this and what it's about.
Sure. So it's an interesting story. So I went to KUCI in 2007, and I started as a DJ, and I was hosting a women's show called Moms Rock the House, and I was involved in Mamapalooza, which is based out of New York, producing music, and I was interviewing different artists. And at the end of 2010, I get a phone call from my stepmother saying Shannon died, my best friend growing up. And I was driving, I had to pull over. I was just like, what? Like, wow, shock. But then I was thinking, no, maybe not, because I think she suffered with her mental health even when we were 15. I could see patterns. So what I did was I ended up calling and talking to a lot of people that she dated. It was kind of like this investigation of who knew what, and did you see something, and was it really... Did she really die by suicide? Like, I really, to this day, I have a lot of questions that are unanswered. So I took a year off from KUCI because I just could not get my act together.
What year was this approximately?
2010, December 2010.
About 14, 15 years ago.
Yeah, so I was just really rocked. You know, I mean, you understand grief. People talk to you, you don't hear them. Everything's just going like this. Like,
how long did that last?
Years.
Can you identify when it stopped?
It was probably 5-6 years. I think it took writing for me. I mean, I would go in the pool and I would swim. I'd cry. I just could not get my brain around this. I would call her mother, and mother would be pissed off at me. She didn't want to talk about it. It wasn't very warm, you know. So
how do you feel about that?
Disgusted. I wanted to do a tribute at our high school. Like, I said, can I do something to honor her? And she says, we don't we're ashamed at how she died, and we're this and that. And I'm like, that's trash, you know.
I know. I don't know how you feel about this, but in terms of my own grief, I have grieved very differently than everyone else in my family. And it's really hard for me to watch other people grieving in a different way than I am.
Yeah.
And
It's
everybody
personal.
has their own way of doing it.
Exactly.
So when people try to involve me in their grief process,
No.
it's very difficult.
No.
And I have like moved away from, I see those people now as emotional vampires.
Right.
So
Right.
you have to distance yourself from people that just can suck the energy out of you.
Toxic.
But they don't
They're
mean
not trying to be.
They think they're helpful.
Right. No, they're not, though.
I know. They aren't. I mean, it's kind of like when somebody shows up at your house after your child dies and they're banging on the door, hysterically crying because of it. It's like, that doesn't help me.
Yeah.
But I want to help you, but I can't because I can't deal with this myself.
You shouldn't have to help other people.
Yes.
Yeah.
You shouldn't have to. But
Yeah.
everybody's grieving, and there's like nobody really knows the rules for grieving until they've experienced it themselves.
Exactly. Yeah.
So what was your takeaway from this experience?
That throwing myself into meaningful things was going to be the way forward. So, which reminds me of you, and I'll tell you why. Because in 2011, I decided I don't want to be a DJ. I want to do a talk show. And I said I wanted to call it Get the Funk Out. And my dad's reaction was, you can't do that. And he was like the king of the F-bomb. And I'm like, what do you mean? And I'm like, I'm going to do it anyway. And so I remember the first time I went on air, and I was so sad at the core. But then I'm talking to a filmmaker telling me about something his daughter went through at college, and there's a whole film on it. And she was drugged. Someone took her phone, et cetera, et cetera. I'm not going to give it away, but his way he managed his grief was through filmmaking and writing.
Did she survive the
She
experience?
survived.
Okay.
She survived. So just these stories would just lift me up, or I would get books delivered to my house, and I'm like, why is this so perfect? The timing of this book being delivered, like the message of a book.
Let's talk about coincidences.
Yeah.
Do you believe in them?
Yes.
Okay.
To a degree. Yeah.
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 What do you think they're all about?
You have to pay attention. That, for instance, butterflies are very symbolic. I was telling you earlier, if one flies by, I'm thinking, okay, what does that mean? Yeah.
A lot of people associate butterflies with an afterlife.
Yeah.
I don't know what that is, but I had a strange experience myself with butterflies.
What happened?
Well, I know that people attribute meaning to butterflies and death. I don't, maybe because the butterfly rises from a cocoon and it's like part of the life cycle, and that's like it's the end of its life, this time right before the end of its life.
Sure.
Even it's the most beautiful part of it. It's the most that's when it's the most dynamic, and the butterfly is able to continue the cycle of life. And when I was at the cemetery at my son's grave, I was thinking about that as I was there, and I was walking back to the car at the end, and I found a perfectly preserved butterfly just sitting on the ground.
Wow.
I know, I've never seen that before, like a beautiful monarch butterfly. I picked it up, I walked back to Blaze's grave, and I left it there.
Beautiful.
But I thought, that's really strange.
Yeah.
Like,
strange and not.
Strange, but what does it mean? So, yeah, I've kind of been trying to understand what all of these coincidences, like very strange, improbable things that occur, what their significance is in our lives. Is there any significance to it? What can we take away from the coincidences? Are they signposts? Are they telling us that we're going the right way?
Yeah, I would say so.
Have you had a lot?
A lot, my whole life.
That's so interesting.
My whole life.
Are you an intuitive person?
I would say so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think intuitive people notice them more because they are more insightful, and they're always looking outside of themselves, especially if you're an extrovert.
Yeah.
I don't know if you are.
No.
But still,
Yeah.
the introverts are looking for patterns in the universe.
That's me.
Yes,
That's me.
I hear you.
Let me just share a little backstory way back. So I grew up in Connecticut and then moved to New York growing up. But I was pretty much an only child because my parents split. My brother went to my dad for years. My parents split when I was like 6 months old. So I was sent to camp when I was 8. and that was too young.
Yes.
The thing that kept me going was that I was a tomboy. So I would climb under the bunk next to my bunk and look for frogs. And one day I'm like, I see this white thing and I'm digging and digging, and I find this thing and I pull it out. It's a bone. Like, we're not talking about a chicken bone. We're talking about a bone.
Like a femur?
Like a femur. Like a femur. Yeah. And I'm like, oh, cool. So I would just like collect these odd things I'd find, frogs, femurs, whatever it was. But I ran to the camp director, and he was giving a tour. And I'm like, hey, and I'm holding this is ridiculous, But just having a sense of adventure and being open, and I think has guided me my whole life.
I love that. So you've always kind of had your eyes open, looking for those things.
Yeah.
Looking for meaning.
Yes.
So what meaning have you found?
A lot. I would say more in the past 3 years writing Better Humans.
Tell me about that.
So it was very emotional to write, because in order to talk about the mental health crisis, I had to kind of peel back my layers and think about, like, what have my struggles been that I've kind of tucked away so tightly. And then interviewing all these people with all the stories made me realize, like, how unaware I was. Yeah.
Do most people suffer from mental health issues?
Yes.
Most people do.
Yes, but mental health issues, there can be to a small degree, to a large degree. But I think even people that look happy, like, look at Twitch, how Twitch passed away, right? He was struggling with depression. Here we saw him on the Ellen Show, dancing, happy, right?
Yeah.
Robin Williams, who I adored Robin Williams. He was diagnosed with a condition. It was devastating. Yeah. So I always say, like, look at the happy people, obviously look at the quiet people. But I think that a lot of adults right now are walking around with trauma, unaddressed trauma, whether something like yourself. And it's like people tell you, like, oh, but you've been grieving so long. Why don't you take a class? Why don't you take a pottery class? Or why don't you throw solutions at you, Jeannie?
Yeah.
And it's like, nope, it's your own personal road.
Life is traumatizing.
Yeah, life is traumatizing.
And none of us get out of here alive.
Yeah.
So knowing that, I don't feel sorry for myself, because we are all on this journey that's traumatizing at times. Nobody gets out of here, if they live a long life, without losing something. Their parents, their spouse, whatever it may be.
Yeah.
What was your goal in writing this? What were you wanting to do? What were you wanting to tell the public?
To wake up, to be more open, to be aware, to pay attention to the people in your life, for Gen Z, so age 9 to 24, let's say, when your kid is in their room a lot and they're not talking and they're shutting down, maybe they don't want to talk to you, but see if you can find someone who they can talk to, because they need to talk to someone. If you're pushing in the pandemic, if you're pushing your older mom into a retirement home for safety and you're worried about COVID, they're going to be lonely and isolated, and that's going to affect them. So just being more aware about the power of connection and empathy and kindness, which made me think of you, and, focusing on purpose and doing good in the world.
Yeah. How do you think that the restrictions that we had during COVID affected mental health? Like, do you still see those effects now?
Oh, yes. I know that we do not yet know the long-term consequences of what, for example, college students went through. And like in the news, you'll hear, oh, well, students are behind academically. Well, no kidding, or in socially, because they didn't have those experiences. And college students especially are saying, I can't make friends. I'm having a hard time connecting. I'm depressed. I do boards at schools like UCI saying, how are you really? And they come up and they'll write, like, depressed, going through it, So there's been a lot of impact. Yeah.
And what about social media and having phones? Do you have any opinions on that?
I think there's a dark, dark side to social media, which is like, I look at technology as great, but also a runaway train that has caused so many problems that we can't keep up with it, and people are trying. I know people are doing great work on LinkedIn promoting what's going on with social media and mental health. And I went to the UCLA Friends of the Semel Gen Z Summit. Students talk about scrolling to death at night, just scrolling, and just not sleeping. And yeah, it's tough.
Is this, do you think, the majority of young people?
I think, I mean, I don't want to generalize. I think it's a lot of young people, because I don't know about you, but if I was 15, 16, remembering how tremendously insecure about my body and everything, and I would get on social media now and compare, and I'd be buying and doing and fixing and adjusting myself as well.
So these kids either try to keep up or they give up.
Yeah.
I can understand that.
Yeah.
I think I've seen a variety of ways that kids cope with this in and around my own home.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's tough. It's tough being a young person.
Yeah.
Do you think there are any solutions to this?
I think raising awareness, taking tech breaks is so important, which is not an easy thing, but I know it, in schools, I don't know what kind of parameters they have or rules, but just trying to get students to understand that there's a life off of their phone. Yeah.
Is there something that you would suggest that parents do to help their children learn how to safely navigate having social media, and
Sure.
how to keep their mental health intact if they're going to use it?
Well, first, I would not advise giving kids phones at a young age.
So what's a young age?
8, 10, 11, 12. I mean, it's so hard because they're like, my friends have the new iPhone,
Right.
But it's so detrimental, because when you go to sleep at night and your kid says, oh, I'm going to bed too, they could be on their phone. And let's say you take their phone away, they could be on their laptop.
Yes.
And the not sleeping causes depression. And then you take your kid to the doctor and they say, well, they need antidepressants. And so you have to be a detective. I'm not saying antidepressants are bad for every kid and shouldn't be used, but I'm just saying be a detective and figure out what's going on if possible.
That's really smart.
Yeah.
I could have used that advice years ago when I found one of my kids using a Game Boy at 2 a.m. undercover.
Yeah.
So, and yeah, that cost that person 1 year of using electronics.
1 year. Wow.
1 year. And then
Hardcore.
it was returned.
Yeah.
And it happened again soon after.
Wow.
So it's almost like it's an addiction.
It's an addiction.
Yeah.
It's an addiction. But look at adults. I mean, we're on our phones. We're not present. It's comforting. Oh, they liked my photo. Oh, I look good. Or this. We're all sucked in.
What do we do? How do we fix this?
Again, like kind of setting parameters, like, I know people that say I put my phone across the room or out of the room at night. Setting limits, being a role model. You can't say to your kid, like, don't go on your phone. How could you go on your phone? And then you're like on your phone, So trying to be present. Yeah.
Yeah. Isn't that the key to
Yeah.
everything? Just being here
Right.
and not in outer space.
Right.
Yeah. When you wrote Better Humans, was the idea that you wanted to propose a plan for how we could be better humans?
Yes.
And what is that plan? What did you conclude?
That's a great question. I have a chapter about being better humans. It comes down to so many different levels. Like you think about in your home, what you can do, schools, having a curriculum for mental health, the messaging. Like I think, why is it that STEM and STEAM were adopted so rapidly, into school systems, but where's the priority for a mental health curriculum? Okay, so important. 988 was a policy that was passed years ago for, emergency situations for mental health.
Is that the 50, what do they call it, the 50-52, or the one where they can lock you up?
No. You can call 988 if you're having a mental health crisis.
Okay, so there's a number that you can call, 988 on your phone if you're having, and you can speak to somebody immediately.
Yes. So, and I put all these resources on my website with Outside the Box, which we haven't talked about yet, but There's so many resources out there. But I didn't know anything about anything, Jeannie. I didn't know about policies, and I thought, in order to write this book, I have to educate myself. So I was looking up, like, okay, what's this policy? And, oh, did it pass? Oh, it goes to the House, the Senate. Well, it seemed like it goes to the House. It's a great idea for a mental health policy. And then everybody went on vacation. And I'm thinking, don't you have, like, family members, grandparents, anybody who's, struggling with their mental health? You want to see this as a priority? And I see that the great idea never passed. Like, what happened?
And then it just was done.
It's done, yeah.
So now someone has to start this all over again?
Yes, but new things are coming up, are taking place, yeah. But it's such an interesting thing when you dive into what's going on with policies. And
is it consistent throughout the United States, or do you see, what kind of variations do you see? For mental health and how it's treated, like in the schools and on the streets and like...
Well, let's see. On the streets, we have a huge, massive homelessness issue.
In the entire United States. There's no place that's got it right.
No. It's not everywhere in the United States, and I'm not educated on everywhere in the United States, but I've traveled to New York. It's gotten worse since COVID. If all you have to do is talk to cab drivers, people on the subway, anyone, they'll say, well, when COVID hit, people were evicted. And they came home and their belongings were on the street. And then suddenly we had more homeless people. And so there's New York. Then there's Oakland, massive. San Francisco, there's so many issues we need to work out that I wish people that were affluent, that had time on their hands, that were passionate about doing good in the world would put some of their energy and their finances and towards that.
Yes. So what is the most vulnerable group of people in our country to mental health issues?
Well, there are so many. So marginalized communities, BIPOC, LGBTQIA. I was asked to speak at a conference tomorrow at UCI, the Black Psychology Student Association. So honored to speak and talking. My workshop is How Are You Really? And I put together a panel, and I'm not on the panel. I'm leading the panel, but I have students from the club, and then they're going to do scenarios that we kind of worked out. So all these, the interesting thing about your question is, so before Better Humans, we were already in a mental health crisis, right? So COVID exacerbated this situation. And if you were already marginalized, you're already struggling financially, in any which way, things were worse, so much worse, So that's what the book is really about. It's about being more aware of the struggles, about people struggling before COVID, what happened after COVID, and hopefully you've changed in some way because of the pandemic.
Can mental health problems be fixed always?
No. They can be managed, but my mother struggled with mental health illnesses. I did not know. I didn't understand the depth of her struggles with substance abuse. I just know that I lived in a very tough, abusive household. And I would never have shared that with you pre-COVID. But
because of shame.
Shame, discomfort, emotion. When I was writing this book, not only did I peel back what happened, but my own layers of questions. And I heard a great quote this week. Do you ever listen to Julia Louis-Dreyfus? She has a new podcast, Wiser Than Me. Oh. Okay. It's very inspiring. So she interviews women like 70s, 80s, everyone from Vera Wang to Jane Fonda to Anne Lamott to all these people you've heard of.
Yes.
Okay. So Anne Lamott was talking about how she was trying to get sober and what a dark time, and she just wanted to be alone. And her friend calls her up and says, I'm coming over. She's like, no, you can't. And her friend says, your mind is a bad neighborhood, and you shouldn't be there alone.
That's true.
Yeah.
I subscribe to that we have to get out of our own heads.
Yeah.
In my opinion, the best way to get out of your own head is to help other people.
Yeah.
Worry about other people's problems instead of your own. It's always easier.
Yeah.
But we're not really dealing with our own problems, and we just don't scratch at it.
Yeah.
So there has to be some kind of a balance between trying to distract yourself and trying to deal with these problems,
Right.
and cope with them. How do you find balance?
That's a great question. So I started seeing a therapist 3 years ago. Another thing I probably wouldn't have told you.
But why should you be ashamed?
You know what? Because there's stigma.
And
That's why.
What do we do about that? How do we get rid of it?
We start talking about it. We start
talking
saying
about it.
things like what I just said to
Yeah.
you. We start just being more open.
Yes.
Because it's like if I wanted to wear purple high tops coming into this interview, and I was thinking, oh, I wonder what Jeannie's going to think. Man, she's going to think, what is she wearing? We have to stop worrying about what people think and just be true to ourselves, because we all have so much negative self-talk, and we all have some kind of baggage, something holding us back from thriving, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the thing that we most want is to thrive.
Right, but we can't if we're holding on to past trauma or toxic behaviors. One of the things my therapist said to me was, so what do you do, to handle stress? And I was describing a life of go, go, go. Well, I started playing tennis, and I was doing this, and I'm taking that, and she's like, but what about your just like quiet time? What about like reading a book? And I didn't have that. I still have a hard time with that. Like,
so you made time for everything that needed to happen in your life.
Yeah, just go,
like doing stuff for your daughters, doing stuff for your husband, and there was no time for Janeane.
No, she said, what percentage of your day do you give to you? And I'm like, 2.
Plus sleep.
Yeah, 2%,
Yeah.
And she was like, you're kidding. I'm like, no.
And probably 99% of humans would tell you that that's about how much they allow themselves.
Right.
Is that an American phenomena?
Yes, and I would say, again, technology is at fault, because we're probably in bed at night scrolling, checking email, not focusing on breathing and unwinding and decompressing. And there's so many challenges right now. I mean, look, all you have to do is put on the news. It's so frightening. The world is so...
But is it?
It's
are
toxic.
we being told that it is?
No, it is toxic. I think people have become mean. People on social media, I mean, come on. You go on social media, and one of the problems for children is they'll get on there and people will just tell you what they think of your new haircut, or for a kid, right? They'll be like, ugh, you kidding? Or you're going out with them, or,
I don't believe in anonymous posting. I think it should be outlawed.
Yeah, well, it could be anonymous or otherwise, right?
Well, I think that the worst of humanity surfaces when we allow people to do things without any repercussions.
Yes.
0 repercussions. Most people won't do the right thing.
Yeah.
And they could be great people, but they
Right.
just might make the wrong decision given that opportunity.
Yes.
And we're seeing that more and more. Even like people that have been involved in the protests are covering their faces.
Yes.
And I don't think that should be acceptable either.
Right.
I think if you are going to do something that impacts other people, be loud and proud.
I agree.
Yeah.
I agree. Yes.
Don't anonymously destroy the world.
I agree.
So that's just my 2 cents on it.
Yes.
But yeah, I mean, we've seen a lot of that. We've seen a lot of anger from young people today.
A lot of anger.
Anger.
Yeah.
Where is that coming from?
Well, some of it is the world that they are left with. The problems that they have to deal with are because of the generations before them. So they're inheriting all of these issues, and social media. They can see anything at any moment, anywhere in the world, right? So if it's walkouts, protests, police brutality, George Floyd, Capitol riots. That's all in my book. Mm-hmm. It's like so much. And the reason I share this with you is because I watched, what was it? Oh yeah, the Gen Z Wellness Summit. So I'm watching this live performance. I went to the event, and it was spoken word poetry. And these girls got up there, and they must have been teenagers. And they're talking about what life is like as a teenager, and from Starbucks, from a caffeinated life, to what's on their phones, to what they see, to getting into college, having a 4.6 and not getting into any of your dream schools. And then where's your mental health? And so all these pressures, Jeannie, right?
Yeah. I mean, I saw it with my own children, the struggles that we had here. I mean, I had 2 introverted children, 1 extrovert. The introverted ones suffered in silence, but they certainly suffered. I mean, we were dealing with mental health crises here every other day, it felt like, when we had teenagers in the house.
Sure.
The pressures on children start so early.
Yeah.
My daughter in the 3rd grade came home with hours of homework, and after doing all of her after-school activities and eating dinner, she sat down to do her work at 6 o'clock, and at 8 o'clock she still wasn't done. I said, okay, it's time to start getting ready for bed. And she said, absolutely not. I'm finishing my homework. And I told her, I said, no, you're not. You're getting ready for bed now.
Good,
and
good.
I said, I am finishing my work. And I was like, okay, now. I have never seen somebody that felt...
I didn't have that work ethic.
I mean, this girl was getting that work done. I mean, it was a battle to get her to go to bed that night. And I told her, I said, you do not have to stay up until midnight doing work. And that's how long she would have been up.
Did you talk to her teacher?
I have talked to teachers about this every year that the kids were in school. And what I found was that at the back to school night, when they would talk about homework, some of the parents would ask if their kids could have more work for after school.
Come on.
Yeah. This one woman
No.
came and said that she wanted her son to have more work when he came home from school. And the only thing I could think of is she's not doing anything with her kids.
No.
She's just trying to keep them busy.
It's a babysitter.
Yeah. I mean, if your kid is involved in an American lifestyle of overscheduled activities after school, there's not a lot of time left over for eating a balanced meal, relaxing, and having dinner.
Yeah, or a hobby.
Or doing homework. I
Or
mean,
a hobby.
there's or a hobby. Yeah,
Hobby.
that's right. Or what about like having friends?
Right.
Or I mean,
I agree. Playing. What's that?
Whatever happened to that? And then
I know.
I don't know how you feel about it, and I'm probably going to make a lot of enemies by saying this, but like I was never in favor of sending young children to schools where they teach them to master skills. Young children, I'm talking preschool. I mean, people send their children to, and I don't know a lot about Montessori, but I understand that
I went to Montessori.
that they are trying to help kids master reading before they start kindergarten.
Well, they didn't do that when I was younger because I never read.
Is that so?
I just didn't read. And now I know why. It's because when you grow up in a home that's kind of tumultuous, you can't concentrate. But Montessori, for someone like myself, was perfect at the
maybe
time.
so, because you didn't have a place that was orderly and
Right. So
and
being
pushing
creative and having creative outlets was everything.
Yeah. I sent my kids to a farm school where they had, big turtles on the playground and a science room with snakes and fish and rabbits and
That's great.
goats and they had all that fun stuff, and I was a big proponent of kids learning from exploring.
Okay, that's good.
And we did a lot of, we were on the road every day with going to aquariums, amusement parks, and, the beach and the zoo and story times at the library. And, we were...
Great foundation.
Yeah, we were very busy. They definitely had a mom that spared no expense when it came to exploring the world.
That's good.
Yeah, it wasn't about spending money. We could have done it without spending a lot of money because there are so many free things that you can, or very inexpensive things to do with young kids that allow them to learn from their environment.
Yes.
And I am a huge proponent of that, and I think that it would really help a lot with our mental health crisis too. If we got people outside more, exploring and finding ways to be happy without devices.
Yes.
And it's strange that we have to even consider that now.
Well, I know, but we do.
Right? We were growing up. There was no everybody on a screen because we had one TV, and my dad was the authoritarian decision maker on what we watched. So,
Wow.
that
must have been exciting.
There was no Brady Bunch at my house. It's because it came on at 5:30 or 6, and my dad came home at that time.
Wow.
So, yeah.
Yikes.
I'm like the only American that didn't see that show regularly.
God.
But we just were kind of missing the point, I feel like. And especially with young people, we're not giving them coping skills.
Right.
We're not giving them access to mental health care. And we're not teaching kids how to identify mental health problems and look for solutions.
Yes.
And I don't know if you covered that in your book or if that'll be the next one.
Yes, but also I will say young people want to hear adults share their stories. They want to hear a parent or a teacher or someone say, you know what, I did struggle. Not in a preachy way, like, well, let me tell you about a long time ago.
Yeah,
Yawn.
walking upstairs or walking up a hill
Back
in the
my
snow
day,
to get to the bus stop, right?
Not that, but more like, hey, I have struggled, and here's who I am. Because some people think, oh, their parents, they haven't gone through anything. So there's that, and I have heard many young people say this. But it's just really important to, as you said, give them opportunities to, experience life off of their screens, and you providing that foundation of togetherness, and that's amazing.
Well, we had a lot of fun, but of course, TV had its place too, because we would get home at 3:00 and I would collapse.
Right.
I had a babysitter there.
Yeah, of course.
So I mean, it was nice to have screens, but there has to be, I think, an appropriate time for those things.
Right.
And
balance.
It can't, balance.
Yeah.
I think we're really missing balance, and we're not really offering that anymore as something that's that we need. That should be a goal, to teach people how to find that balance in their lives.
Right.
Where would that come in if we did want to start providing that as part of the education of our children?
Well, I talk about purpose-driven initiatives. So, for instance, I just went to the Pacific Marine Mammal Center.
Love that place.
Oh, do you know they're closed right now to November? No, it's a good thing. It's a good thing. They're doing a multi-million-dollar expansion. The late Bob Barker donated when they had the flooding and everything, but they've gotten even more donations. So I went down there because I took this amazing audio class through Columbia Journalism online with someone from Marketplace, and she said one of your assignments is to go and do like a 3-minute, like professional NPR style interview. So I went down there and I'm interviewing, and you could hear the seals in the background. It was loud. Yeah. But I interviewed the CEO and I got to see the seals, and it's so interesting. So starting with, you could go volunteer there. People don't know that. You can actually get trained.
Can young people do that?
Yes.
How young?
I don't know. You'd have to find out.
Okay.
But I think teenage, and they train you. So the seals, it's so sad. Some are shot at because people don't want them in the harbor, on the docks. So there are harbor guards, I guess, that it's awful. Or they get cancer because there's DDT. But the center rehabs them, and then you can go to these events where they release them back in the ocean. And it's amazing.
I've been there.
You've done
yes.
that?
Well, because the kids
6:30 in the morning.
No, my children went to summer camps there.
Okay.
And as part of that, every session they would release one at the beach while and we would all go there and they do it.
You've got to go to the party. I'll send you info in November, because it's huge. It's going to be a massive.
Oh, yeah. I would love to hear. I think our listeners would like to hear about that too.
Oh, yeah.
So we'll put some information up about that. Yeah. And if there's anything you want to have come up, any promotional materials that you have, if you provide those to us when you write edits, you can add that in appropriately.
Sure.
And we'll get your website put up too.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Want to tell us about your website? What's on it?
Okay. So Outside the Box is an initiative I started in 2021 in response to the pandemic. I started having conversations with a lot of students about mental health struggles. So I started otbseries.com, and I do a lot of different things like workshops and panels or outdoor activities with students around mental health and connection and kindness and things like that.
Is this monetized?
Sometimes not. Yeah.
But you've chosen a career that allows you to help people.
Yes.
That was purposeful.
Yes.
Is everything that you do about making the world better?
Now it is.
I love that. What made a change for you?
Realizing that I could see myself in other people. I'm here, you're all alone, you're sitting in your grief. You've got to just open the door a little and get outside and then connect with other people. And their stories and their experiences can lift you up, and you might lift them up. And then through that, you might be inspired to go do something else.
That's so interesting, because you're an introverted person, but you're telling me that talking to other people, which is really an extroverted activity for the most part.
I think I have to go home and recharge.
That's what it is. It's not that introverts don't like other people.
No,
they can't handle as much of it at one time.
Yes.
I need recharge time too. I consider myself one of the most introverted extroverts.
Yes.
That's just me, because I can only do so much. But some people, like my husband, can go and go and go and go, and they never need recharge time because they are charged by being around other people.
Right.
Yeah, it's like the opposite.
Exactly.
Reverse energy consumption.
Yeah.
Is philanthropy a luxury?
It can be. I think it just depends on the situation. So I have an issue with the big cyber trucks. What are those called?
Yeah, the is that what they're called?
I hope you don't have one.
Not this time.
So I have a problem with knowing more now after writing the book what's going on in the world and seeing people with these big expensive trucks, because I just wish they would, as I said earlier, think about taking their finances and doing something good in the world. And so maybe they use that truck as a way to promote something good in the world. I don't know, but it just seems like $175,000 could be used towards something else. So I just wish people would be more aware of...
Is that the only vehicle that you've got your eye on?
No, there's other vehicles.
I know. I'm just
like that, nothing.
That's interesting to me.
It's an example.
It's an example. I mean, of course, where we live here in Orange County, it's a Bentley, a Ferrari. I mean, they're everywhere. They're all around me. And I feel the same way about it. It's almost like, if you have that much, why not just share it with other people?
Yes.
Why? But then when I look at my friends that have things like that, they do both.
Good. That's good.
Yeah.
That all accounts.
Yeah. So yes, it's a luxury to be able to do both.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It is a luxury. But I have always found that it's our society is somewhat an unfair place, in the sense that people that have very little oftentimes do so much for others.
That's right.
And then there are people that have so much that do a lot too, but it's still a much smaller percentage of difficulty for them to give, because they have so much to give, and it's that, and so I think I have struggled with that, with the fact that we glorify philanthropists, and we praise them, and we give them benefit dinners, and we name buildings after them, but they're not better than people that have very little that do so much for others. Yes. So that's another thing. And a reason why I like doing this podcast is I want to recognize people that do great things that are not normally recognized, because they're not getting a gala dinner in their honor.
Yes.
But they might do tremendous things, like write books and create plans for solving big world problems here. So that's why I needed to have Dr. Janeane Bernstein on PeppTalks. But seriously, though, I mean, you are somebody that spent a great deal of time thinking about the problems that are affecting society. And I agree with you that mental health is probably the biggest problem that we have right now. I mean, if I look at my own life, my son's death was caused by mental health crisis in my mind.
Yes.
So my son's death was also a product of social media.
Yes.
A product of having too much access to electronics, too much ease in connecting with anybody in the world in a moment. So I agree with you 100% that these are big problems. I mean, I lost a child who could have changed the world.
That's right.
He could have found a cure for cancer, and he's gone now because of these problems that we are not working on. So I am with you on this. Yeah. I am so happy that I know you, and that we're going to work together on this. Yeah. I love NAMI. I mean, I like donating money to them, and I like what they do, and I have used their coursework.
Yeah,
they have a tremendous, and I don't know if anybody knows this, but I'm going to tell our listeners right now. If you have someone in your family that's struggling, NAMI, NAMI.org. Yeah. Yes, they have a tremendous peer groups that they organize in your area.
That's right.
And these are peer run, so these are run by other parents who have been through this. Yeah. And they sit down with you and other people in your same boat dealing with mental health crises at home. And it's like a 12-week course, and they teach you about mental health and how you can better help the people in your life with it. And it saved my family at the time.
It's amazing.
And I learned so much.
Yeah, they're great.
Here I was. I had a liberal arts education. Psychology was a big part of it. And I had a lot of sociology as also part of my education. And I did not understand more than half of what I was learning for the first time in this course. Sure. Very useful information. it almost made me believe that every parent, every adult should be required to understand these basic things about mental health.
I agree with you.
Very basic things.
Yeah.
We could be saving lives.
That would be a great foundation for starting in schools, or even when right after you have a child, like as they're going into kindergarten or whatever it is, just to be aware of technology and your own mental health. And
So what is that you have there, Janeane?
Okay, so when I moved in with my dad at 16, I got this job working at a dry cleaner, and I had it for 3 years. It was very long hours, very boring. And after the third summer, I said, Dad, I need a different kind of job. I'm going to try something new. And he said, what do you have in mind? I said, well, I heard about painting. And I signed up with College Pro Painters.
Whoa, this is like student movers?
Well, but painting houses.
Yeah.
And then I thought it was going to be interior. Well, it was exterior on 40-foot ladders.
That was your job?
That was my job for the summer.
Did you like it?
I loved it.
Oh.
It was amazing. It was so scary at first, but challenging. My stepmom used to be very angry because I had paint in my hair, and but I loved it. I did it all summer.
Wow, and you got cool clothes out of it too.
I know. So this was an example. We were talking about like doing something different out of your comfort zone, getting off the screens. This is totally different. My dad thought, "Are you sure?" And I loved it.
That's so
I wanted
great.
to show that to
I
him.
love that. So it gives parents ideas. If your kid can't find a job,
Do something different.
Do something
non-linear.
outside of the box.
Exactly.
Nobody says that you have to, flip hamburgers all summer.
Right.
What's your dream for the future?
That we see some significant changes in society, that we end the stigma around mental health, that we prioritize mental health in all aspects. Also that higher education takes a look at the whole process of getting into college. Like, let's start looking at a student as a whole person as opposed to just a score. I mean, I bombed my SATs twice and barely scraped by to get to Syracuse. And the only thing I think got me in was sports and a good attitude. And I just wish we would start looking at people as humans and not as scores and numbers and the accolades and things like that.
I totally agree with you. I am so, I guess, disillusioned with our educational system now, especially understanding now that we have not taught our children how to think on their own.
Right.
What we have taught them to do is to open their minds and fill it with garbage.
Right.
They don't know how to decipher truth from fiction, lies from truth, evil from good.
Yeah. Well, the problem is with this too, and I am a journalist and I'm paying more attention to online stuff, is everything's like clickbait. So you look at something on Yahoo News and they'll say the real reason why she never ... and you're like, what is this cliffhanger, right? And it's all like that. It's crap. It's all ridiculous ways for us to click on something, and it's usually like a rehashed news story or a made-up nonsense. It's not truth.
Yeah, I can't tell you how many times I get an alert that a story that was written 6 years ago about Blaze is turned up on a website in a foreign country.
Ridiculous.
Yes,
Sick.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So with that, Janeane, we have had an amazing conversation. I wish I had another 3 hours with you because you're so cool.
We're going to hang out.
We'll hang out. And, maybe someday, I think in its next iteration, PeppTalks is going to be more of a group chat.
That would be great.
Yeah, and I'd love to have you come back and
That'd be
part of the discussion. I think that would be very cool.
Awesome.
As our mental health expert. Super. Thank you
you
so much for being here with me. Well, that's been another episode of Pep Talks with Jeannie. Once again, I would like to thank our guest, Dr. Janeane Bernstein, for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me. I've known you all these years, and this is so great you're doing this. I love being on your show. Thank you. If you want to find out more about me, I have a website, JaneaneBernstein.com or OTBseries.com. This is my new book, Better Humans. And this is my first book, Get the Funk Out, and stay in touch. Thank you.
#Blaze It Forward is a campaign that my family started to repair the world with kindness and to honor our son Blaze, who was murdered in 2018. You can learn more about how you can make a difference at www.blazebernstein.org or on our Facebook group #BlazeItForward. Special thank yous to all the volunteers that make this podcast happen every 2 weeks when we publish them, and with my philanthropic endeavors, and that includes my terrific producer and sound expert, Eli Moskowitz. Thank you, Eli. And a special shout out to my son, Janeane Bernstein, who created the phenomenal music at the beginning and end of our show. And thank you all again for joining me. I'm Jeannie Pepper, and this has been another episode of Pep Talks with Jeannie.